So and that's theory, I'm 99% right because I haven't found the person who found them, and at that time they didn't have grids, meaning when they picked up a body, they say they picked them up at the corner of West and Liberty or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yes.
They were just pulling bodies out. And from all the people I've talked to, of course, Willie Rodriguez, he went into the lobby. So I've gotten confirmation that the lobby was blown out. And I think he had decided at the last minute to come into the lobby or to go to the 106th floor to the seminar. And I think he didn't feel a thing and there was an explosion. And just by the nature of the injuries, he just never knew what hit him. And so why I'm so interested, and before I really wasn't that interested in the buildings part of it because I just didn't know what happened to him. But there's no question in my mind that he died from an explosion. So he could have even died. There could have been an explosion before the plane hit. I mean, Willie Rodriguez told me he knew there was explosions before. So what happened? I think he had died there, and then they were just pulling bodies out, and they probably just left them on the street until the ambulances weren't even there, and then the possibility the towers came down, and that's where the burns come in, slight burns he had. But it's the explosions. Now I've gone to every 9/11 commission. I did go to every 9/11 commission here, and the NIST report, the National Institute of Standard Technology. They refused to acknowledge that there was any explosions, and Rosie, you can't believe how many people I've talked to. Again, firemen, EMS workers, the policemen, and the explosions that were taking place in that, and the government, the 9/11 Commission, and this report, which is a government agency, is part of the Department of Commerce, they just refused to acknowledge there was explosions.
Well, not only do they refuse to acknowledge there were explosions, they did not even include Willie Rodriguez, who was the janitor in Tower 2 for over 20 years, who was the last man out, who had the key to go up and led the firemen up. They didn't even include his testimony in the 9/11 Commission report.
Well, there's a lot of testimony of explosions. They admitted every one of them.
Right. So you and a bunch of parents got together. You got together with a lot of scientists, which brings us to Tony Sambodi. Hello, Tony.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
Good. How'd you get the name right first time?
Sambodi. They wrote it out, Sam-Bo-T. So there you go. But it doesn't look like Sambodi when you look at it. I can tell you that.
No.
How did you get involved in this, sir?
I guess the Building 7 is what made me suspicious. I guess same thing that happened to a number of others. Stephen Jones, Niels Harrit, a lot of us that saw the collapse of Building 7 for the first time and had to wonder out loud, to ourselves at least anyway, what was going on.
Now, did this happen, Tony, right as you saw it at about 6 o'clock on September 11th?
No,
I didn't come after?
I didn't actually see the collapse of Building 7 on TV that night. I heard about it on the radio and I was perplexed. And it wasn't until years later that, when Stephen Jones wrote his paper, that I realized that there, I had a feeling it could have been a controlled demolition. But then I had to ask myself when there would have been a chance to set the charges in that building. And that caused me to start. It's an obvious controlled demolition. Okay, there's no way around it. I don't know if you watched what.
Tell everybody what you do for a living.
I'm a mechanical engineer. I work on structures in the aerospace industry.
And you had no connection to 9/11 other than you're an American citizen.
That's right.
And so you read Stephen's report and you thought, well, this is quite accurate.
Yeah, it's certainly as far as Building 7 was concerned, I thought it was accurate right off the bat, and that makes me suspicious of the whole thing.
And tell me what Stephen Jones, what his article basically said.
Well, he based on molten metal that's in the rubble of just the 3 collapsed buildings. There's a very high temperature molten iron and steel under World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7, and that caused him, along with other things, caused him to realize that there's a very good possibility that those buildings had prepositioned charges in them. Well, certainly Building 7, he's saying it's a controlled demolition. And I have to agree with that.
And have you come under any criticism for questioning the official story, Tony?
Oh, only by people, self-styled debunkers on the Internet, who most often don't even give their own names, so we don't know who they are. Any real engineers that I work with or am in contact with, when I show them this, they shake their heads too. So it's not like we're not dealing with a conspiracy theory here. We're dealing with a crime. And in this report on Building 7 is absolutely it's nonsensical.
Well, is it true that it defies the laws of physics that a steel building would collapse into dust particles in its own footprint?
A steel building can't disintegrate like that.
Yeah.
But it can. If you're using charges, most of the work is done by gravity in a controlled demolition, Rose. But the point is, you have to release that energy, and it doesn't release on its own. When the building is built to sustain several times, each floor in these types of buildings are built to sustain several times the load above them for safety, okay? So they don't just fall apart on willy-nilly, nor by fire. And it's never happened before by fire for good reason, because of what I'm saying. They're built with tremendous reserve strength, and it takes a lot of heat energy to heat the steel to the point where it's going to fail because it's got so much reserve capacity, strength.
Right. Now, people said, I've been quoted as saying, fire can't melt steel, meaning not that it can't at a certain temperature.
No, it can't. It can't, Rosie. You were right. You were accurate on that, okay, because it can't melt steel except in the controlled circumstances of a blast furnace or with a welding torch or with incendiaries. They're the three options.
Because,
okay?
When you're making eggs for your kids with a steel frying pan, it doesn't melt as you're making the eggs.
That's right. That's right. You can't melt it. It's very difficult to melt steel, and blast furnace are very highly controlled circumstances. So the molten metal, that's what caused Stephen Jones to be very suspicious, because he knew, many of us didn't, and I'll admit I was one. Right off the top of my head, I wasn't aware of that, but he's exactly right. And it's proven that you can't get a diffuse flame fire hotter than 1,800 degrees in a laboratory. Well, steel doesn't begin to melt until 2,750. I'm talking Fahrenheit here.
Right.
So there's several, there's a diffuse flame, and then there's a controlled volume, like in a jet engine, and then there's a blast furnace. Well, you need a blast furnace to melt steel. Jet engines don't melt the steel components either.
Well, people have said, the jet engine fuel was so hot that it went down the elevator shafts and melted all the core of the building.
Well, that's a misnomer. You're talking about the towers because it's an airplane, and we're really trying to concentrate on Building 7 right now.
Okay, well, Building 7 was not hit by any airplane.
That's
and
right.
It had fires that, you can see on the videotape that were not raging out of control. There was just a fire in another, in Shanghai, I believe.
That's right, the Shanghai fire, and that I'm waiting to see if that building had it was completely steel, both the core and the exterior. Because interestingly, if you look at the day after photos, even the scaffolding is still standing. It was welders that caused that fire. There was some kind of mistake by welders, and the building was under some kind of renovation, and they had scaffolding all on the outside. Well, even the scaffolding is still standing 30 stories up.
And that fire burned in Shanghai for how long? Do you know, Tony?
I don't know precisely, Rose. It was just, I guess it was Tuesday that happened. But
happened Monday night, and it burned for 5 hours.
Was it Monday night? Okay.
Yeah, about 5 hours.
And it burned for 5 hours.
And that was a torch. If you looked at the video, that whole thing, that was a huge conflagration. That was huge. The whole building was lit up.
So there's no way, in your expertise as a mechanical architect, engineer, that Building 7 could have ever fallen the way it did without explosives being involved?
Not without. So I tend to refer to it as demolition devices because I can't say what it is, but it's the same thing. Some form of demolition device was used to bring that building down.
Is it true that there was thermite found at Building 7?
Well, in the dust, we can't say for sure whether it's where the dust was mixed between Building 7 and the towers, but in every sample of the dust that they tested, there was these red-gray chips, which are thermite. Nanothermite, I should say, on one side. And it appears to have been painted on somehow because there's a gray layer on the back that appears to be a primer.
Now, you two did you two know each other before getting involved with this BuildingWhat.org?
I knew Bob from, Ted Walter from New York City Can had asked me last year to help in the education of the New York City Council, and there's 51 council members. So me, another structural engineer from North Jersey, Mike Donnelly, and an architect named Bill Brinier all were helping New York City can. We would go. There would be an engineer or an architect with Ted Walter when he talked to